Hello everybody, it's I, Riff Raff Hornhelm, back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault. And today we're going to do a monster review, and today it's just a wrap up with some thoughts and suggestions and some additional information having to do with dragons. Here there be dragons, and we're back for one final discussion. So, what have I got to add? Well, you've seen now all 12 of the original dragons that come from the Monster Manual. The original Monster Manual as published for use with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or what's commonly known today as 1E. Well, 1E, of course, implies there was something before that. Well, yes, it was. Dungeons & Dragons is 50 years old this year in terms of commercial release. But the game itself that we've been talking about is one that was really released in the late 1970s, 1978 to be specific, or once again, depending on where you live, the very end of 1977. And before that, there was Basic, what many people today call Classic, I believe, or Original, however you want to look at it. And I'm not going to go into that in a great deal today. I just want to mention the fact that the dragons, when they started showing up in either the abbreviated booklet or the abbreviated contents of the complete basic book, they talked about dragons. Well, it's in the name, right? Dungeons and Dragons. And there were only four dragons. Black, white, red, and brass. Kind of an odd combination. This was before Tiamat and Bahamut, and the descriptions of the dragons and their abilities was much more limited. Really limited. Really, really, really limited. But of course, because they were dragons, and because it was in the title of the game, when people first came to the game, before Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was released, this is what you had to work with. And there honestly really wasn't very much in the actual printed material. There was a little bit more in some of the fan material, the dragon, this kind of stuff. And from discussions at gatherings that evolved into the initial 12 dragons that were in the Advanced game, the original Monster Manual. And of course are, nothing compared to how much the dragon characters have been fleshed out in the current version of the game. So, really, what kind of notes do I have to give you about dragons? And going back again to the Monster Manual and these last 13, including the introduction videos that I've done about dragons within Dungeons & Dragons, there are some interesting things that have popped up, to me at least, reviewing what's been going on. Some of the dragon reviews I thought would get higher viewership because of how popular they are as dragons, at least in iconography and all the imagery and discussions about the game, the movies. Red Dragon. Well, I guess it's been overdone. I guess there's just been too many who've looked at it. Because in the review series, that's my worst one. Kind of odd to me. But overall, the response has been very nice. I've gotten some very nice both direct messages and comments regarding the various dragons and how people saw them and used them. And one of the common themes that came out of it, and this also applies to people that I know within the gaming community, is how few people in modern D&D, and I say, primarily, I guess, 5e, have actually fought against dragons. It's not very common. That's kind of weird to me. I have to honestly say that in my early days of playing the game, within the first 3 to 5 years of playing the game, I think I ran into every kind of dragon, and I've run into them in a variety of different ages and capabilities. if you haven't used a dragon, they're part of the game. Really. You should be embarrassed if you as a DM or you as a player have yet to interact with a dragon in any capacity. It's part of the game. Dungeon Masters, if you haven't had your adventuring group go up against a dragon, well, you need to correct that. And players, if you're not seeing a dragon somewhere in the process, or if the party you're playing with says they've never seen one either and they've been playing this for 2 years, you should have a word with your dungeon master. Dragons are an integral part of the game. They give you a very nasty opponent. Under the best of circumstances, is smart, very canny and wise, and evil and greedy, and is able to express it both as a interacting character as well as being a fearsome opponent in battle. If you're not using dragons, you're really missing out on one of the core precepts of the game. And certainly, once again, it's in the title, it's in so much of the support literature and so forth for the game, but use them. They're fun. They really are. So, what other options do you really have, though? I mean, you've got these dragons, and they can be really a lot of fun. Well, one of the things that people forget about is that you have the opportunity to use these as beasts. They do not have to be intelligent. Well, sorry, they'll still be intelligent, but they do not have to be speaking. They don't have to cast spells. They don't have to interact with you on a character personality basis. All they have to do is go roar and jump on you or spit something at you that is going to make you either die or feel very bad. That can happen whether it's evil or it's good. There's very few dragons, only at the very top echelon, that are virtually guaranteed to speak. And if they're guaranteed to speak, they don't necessarily have the ability to cast spells. Now remember that in the monster manual, everything that's written up in the monster section for dragons is based on not only giving you the information as a DM or player about what the dragon's capable of, but it's structuring it to be created as a wandering monster. Or, probably more specifically, a randomly generated monster. So if you're building a dungeon and you're looking to populate the dungeon, in the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, a very common method was to use this as a series of tables to create creatures to go into your dungeon. You had X amount of chance of getting this, and if it did, then you'd know whether, for instance, if it was a dragon, was it a young dragon, was it an adult dragon, was it an ancient old dragon? You would have the opportunity to roll that as a part of establishing what was in the game. It works, but not very well. The system has a well-intentioned result. The biggest problem it runs into is spells. Spells should be logical for what the creature is. A spell that only aids a human or aids them in such a way that is totally unrelated to the dragon or the dragon's needs and abilities shouldn't be a spell that you should roll up as part of a wandering monster or a random encounter. And yes, you can always roll it again until you get something that makes sense, but my argument would be is use common sense. If you're a dungeon master, go in and pick the spells that make sense for this kind of creature to have. They may only have 4 first level spells or something like that, but the spell should make sense for what it is. It shouldn't just be something entirely random. That'll make the encounter a little bit more real, a little bit more fun. Another thing to emphasize is the age of the dragon. It makes a huge difference, okay? It skews the hit points. It skews the size. It, in skewing the hit points, reduces the amount of damage that's done by breath weapon which is, if it does damage, it's always equal to what the hit points are of the creature, with the exception of, who is it, Bahamut, who has the Sonic Blast that does, or a Sonic Disintegration that does like 150 points of damage. But other than that, everything is very tied to the actual hit points that the monster has. So if you're breathing fire or electricity or whatever it may be, it's going to be reduced based on the age of the dragon. And really, when people think about dragons as a threat, what they're really thinking about is a dragon who is an ancient, old, very top of the various ages of the dragon. Okay, that's not realistic either. If you're going to run across them, they shouldn't always be the most ancient, old, and deadly version of that dragon. And of course, when it's not, it changes the whole game. Even if they're spell using and are capable of casting spells, they may only have 1 or 2 spells and first level only. And it makes a big difference. So age of dragon is very important when you're looking at establishing a dragon for an encounter. Ancient old definitely makes sense. You're the DM after all, so you pick the scenario. You're the one who's going to determine what the age of the dragon is appropriate to it. One that you wander into, perhaps in some caves, that at the back of the caves leads into a dungeon. In the caves there may be, I don't know, let's say it's a red dragon. But it is a young adult red dragon. It doesn't have the same capabilities as an ancient old, and it's not going to have as many spells. And it's going to be easier to cope with from both taking damage from it as well as giving damage to it. Of course, one of the fun things you can do with dragons, especially out of 1E, that I don't see done anymore really, is subduing them. It used to kind of be like a mark of a particularly good party of adventurers if you had your own dragon. If you had subdued one and were either using it as a beast of burden, or if alignments worked well together, you possibly could use them as a kind of contracted ally, but still subdued. And of course, you could subdue them and sell them. There was nothing like a group of adventurers bringing in a subdued dragon into town to the market for sale. Don't forget that part of it. Subduing dragons is part of the fun of playing against them. And with them being so avaricious, so greedy for gold and so forth, putting them in a position where you can subdue them, or finding a younger dragon that you could subdue and sell, is something that adds an awful lot to any adventure. So don't forget that subdual part. But dragons as a whole, because they were so heavily developed as a character or creature character, really have a lot of options. And as a player, they're a lot of fun to go up against. They make you think. That's always good. Well, for most folks. But from a DM standpoint, well, I love dragons. They're so much fun to use. They are, they can be witty and funny, as an NPC, if you will. And they're very capable, especially when you get to an ancient old dragon of one of the more deadly types. So keep in mind that you can have a lot of fun with dragons. And I would encourage people who have not yet experienced dragon interaction within their dungeon, find a way to encourage that within your group. DMs, consider using these more frequently. Remember, it's in the name of the game. Dungeons and Dragons. The dragons are a lot of fun. So, I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I would encourage you to go back and look at any of these. When I get a few minutes here, I'll put together a playlist for all of the related videos, and it'll give you an opportunity to see the way Dungeons and Dragons were versus what many of you play today. Things have changed over the years, but it's still a lot of fun. Any case, I hope you enjoyed this today, and if you did, please leave us a like. Drop us a comment. Consider subscribing. But most of all, come back and see us again in the future. Take care, everyone, and remember, dwarves rock!